Hello, in this section we'll be talking about creating and editing the scenes in your ezDMX venue. This window is accessed by pressing the Scenes Edit from the main window menu. A scene is a collection of an amount of steps, and each step is a collection of an amount of channel transitions. The top portion of this window is dedicated to editing the step, and the bottom portion is dedicated to editing channel transitions. But first, let's talk about the steps themselves. A step has three different fields: the name, the transition time, and the hold time. The name is optional and can be used as a simple correlation between the step and what the action it performs. The transition time is how long it takes for the transitions to go from their starting value to their end value. And the hold time is how long the transitions are held after they have elapsed. Now, to change any of these times, you can simply type it into the box and hit enter, or my preferred method is by using the timeline itself. You can see that the little red slider is used to control the transition, and you can click and drag that back and forth, or you can use the black slider at the end of each step to control the step length. Now, the step length is a simple addition between the transition and the hold time, and you can move the transition beyond the step length, which will increase the length itself, and consequently move the step length past the transition to decrease it. Now let's talk about the buttons that we have in this area. We have the first and last step buttons, along with the previous and next. We have the Add New Step button, which creates a new step. You have your generic cut, copy, and paste that work just like any other piece of software. You have your undo and redo buttons, which are very useful to fix any problems or errors that you may have made. And we have the zero button, which is zeros all transitions for every single fixture. So when I click this, you'll notice that all the transitions are forced to zero. And then you have the clear button, which clears all the transitions for this step. Now, you might notice that when I added a step, the first two are very similar in color, but the last one is not. What this last step is the fade step. Normally, when a scene is over, other pieces of software would just do an immediate blackout. But we thought it might be handy for you to be able to actually control what happens at the end of the step. And what this lets you do is gives you a final set of transition that occurs no matter when or what causes the step to end, the scene to end, I'm sorry. To actually use this, you would generally extend the transition to a given amount of time and add the appropriate transitions. Generally, you might want to use this to do a slow blackout or to move fixtures slowly into their resting positions. To give you a little bit more granularity on your scene, we gave you the zoom in and out buttons for your timeline. Now, let's talk about the transitions, but first, let's go over the different elements in this UI. The top label, the fixture label, has the description that we added in the previous section, along with the starting DMX address. When you mouse over the label, it gives you the different fixture type for that fixture. Below that, you have an array of your different channels, along with the icons and the descriptions that you've added before. Below that, you have your channel sliders, which control the values live on your fixture, and below that, you have your transition buttons. Let's add a few transitions for some example. To do that, you will simply either click or drag the sliders, press the buttons for a small change, or press anywhere on the sliders for a large change. Notice that when I added a transition, the transition button automatically changed to a linear type. What the type is how the transition actually occurs. And currently we have 4 types. And to change the type, you would simply press the button to change it. Now, the first type is linear, which is self-explanatory. It's just a simple linear transition from the starting value to the end value. The next type is an immediate transition, which instantly changes the value whenever that transition is activated. The next two types are exponential transitions, with the first one being slow to fast and the next one being fast to slow. Now, you might ask yourself, what happens when a channel does not have a transition? Well, in this case, mixing goes into account. What mixing is it allows different scenes to work together. Now, for example, if we were to leave this scene as it is, what would happen is we only have one transition for this first channel, and every other channel would be left alone. That is, it would not be changed. Now, this might create some errors because you might want to have certain behaviors for the very first step that you do not have right now. So what I recommend and what I tell certain people is your very first step, step number 1, make sure you have transitions set for the channels that you actually need. So for example, we know that this fixture has a gobo channel, and we might be using this in another step, but in this one, let's say I just want a spotlight on top of my performer. So I want to make sure that the gobo is turned off as soon as the scene is activated. So what I'm going to do is, instead of actually changing the channel, instead of changing the value by using the slider, I'm just going to go ahead and press the channel button and give it an immediate transition, so that as soon as the transition starts, our gobo is turned off. Now let me add some simple transitions just for example purposes. And let's say that I like how this fixture turned out. I like the settings that it has, but I have all these other fixtures that I kind of want to do that. I kind of want them to do the same thing, and it doesn't really make sense for me to manually go and change the channels here and try to match the exact values I just set. So in this case, what you can do, actually you can do one of two things, is you can select two fixtures at the same time, and selecting happens by clicking the left button on the fixture label, but in this case you want to hit Control and select two at the same time. If you change one slider in one fixture, the other slider moves accordingly and gets the same value. Now this is great for when you're first setting up the fixtures, but what do you really want to do when you have all the transitions set? You really don't want to move all the sliders and select every single fixture. So for this case, what you'd want to do is just select one fixture by clicking on it, then right click to open up the advanced menu. The menu has a simple copy and paste feature, which I will demonstrate right now. Once you hit copy, all the transitions are copied into memory. And then if you right click on another fixture and hit paste, all those transitions are copied identically into that fixture. The other options include a clear and zero. The clear removes all transitions for this fixture for this step. The zero forces all transitions for this fixture for this step to zero and is useful for a blackout. Apply to all takes all the transitions from this fixture and copies them to all identical fixtures in this step. So if I were to do this, let me demonstrate that by clearing this fixture first. If I were to hit apply to all, my other two fixtures have the same transition set to them. And this is very useful if you make a change in one by accident and you just want to revert. The other options that we have in this is the copy whole scene and paste whole scene. And what this does is, instead of working on the step level, this works on the scene level. And generally you would use this only when you add a fixture to the end of your DMX chain when it hasn't been there before, and you want it to act like a fixture that was there before. And obviously you don't want to go into each and every step and have to copy and paste. This allows you to do it all in one go. Now let's go ahead and go to another step and see what happens. So in this first step, we have all our fixtures kind of, we have the first four channels kind of in the middle and the last channel completely off. Now when we go to the second step, you notice that the channel values remain the same, but there are no transitions. This is because ezDMX preserves the values in your previous channels, in your previous values in that step, so that you do not actually have to have a transition in the second step to maintain the value from the first step. Now consequently, let's just go ahead and take everything to zero. Now we could do this by going down on each slider manually, but I prefer to just use the down arrow right here to zero all the fixtures. Now if we go back and forth, we can tell that we have some transitions here and some values here, and everything is 0 down at the bottom. Also, let's add some simple transitions here to the fade scene. I prefer to start with all sliders down, and generally you would actually have some values in the second scene so that the fade actually happens. Now that we have at least the starting of a demo scene, let's talk about some a little bit more advanced features. The current advanced feature that we have is a color window. Now you'll notice that this fixture has a red, green, and blue channel, and selecting the colors by hand would be somewhat difficult, if not very time consuming, and just feels wrong to do it by hand. So what you can do is you can click on View and Color Window, and a little window will appear in the top right hand corner that you can move around. Right now it's disabled because we haven't selected any color channels. But to select a color channel, simply click on any of the channels or move any other sliders. So I'm going to click on the red, and you'll see that the color window actually changes to match the current color that we have. What the color window has is two areas. First you have the hue, which controls the brightness, and then you have the color wheel itself, which you just use to move around and select the color. The actual color appears right here and should closely mimic what your fixture is displaying. Obviously, most RGB fixtures do not give you true color, so it won't be exact, but it will be slightly close. Now, to close this, you could either click another channel, which will disable the menu, disable the window, or just close the window altogether. So now that we have everything set up, I generally recommend to save, just so that you don't lose anything. And to do that, you access the File menu. Obviously, you can create and open scenes that you've already had, but in this case, let's go ahead and click on Save. Once you click on Save, a window will appear listing all your current scenes, but in this case, since this is our first scene, none exist. So I'm just going to go ahead and type Test and click on Save, and you'll notice that the scene name appears in the window header right over here. So now, once you have it saved, it's generally a good idea to start playing back this scene just to make sure everything works the right way. To play back the scene, you have the controls in the top left hand corner of this window. And you actually have an option for looping the scene. So what looping the scene does is pretty straightforward. It keeps looping the scene one step to the next, and when it gets to the last step, it automatically rolls back to the first. So once looping is on, you'll notice that the slider moves from 0 to about 4.6 seconds and then keeps repeating. And also when it moves, you'll notice that the sliders change along with the step, and you'll see the changes live on your fixtures. Now if we were to turn off the loop, you'll notice that the playback stops at the very end. Sometimes you might want to have only one set of transitions in the entire step. For example, you might want to have the fixture just roll around, change color, and focus on one spot and stop. And it's really generally not a good idea to give it a really large hold time, since if you happen to go over that hold time, the scene will repeat. So it's sometimes a good idea just to turn off the loop. Now, to exit playback mode, you can either just click a step, or you can press the pause button or the stop button. What the stop button does is it plays back your fade step. If you don't have any transitions in your fade step, the stop button won't do anything. But in this case, once we press it, you'll see the scrubber line go across the fade step and stop. Also, you have another option called Revert. Now what this does is it allows you to go back to your last save point if you made any changes. This is sometimes useful in the case that you've made a lot of changes and you really don't want to keep doing undo to go back to where you were. So if I were to make some transitions here and click Revert, it'll go back to the last place I saved it. this concludes this tutorial.